So, yeah, I think a big misunderstanding is around feminine energy and not really, in order to understand what feminine energy truly is, I think it's important to understand what it's not. And so when we look at it from the lens of, for example, codependency, which is what a lot of women I see across the board struggle with, then we can kind of start to understand what feminine energy truly is. So codependency is really about a disconnection from self. It's about a disconnection from our heart, our needs, and our ability to feel that we can meet them. So we end up dating from a place of this inner emotional void. And that leads to all kinds of codependent patterns where we're stuck longing and pining for a man who's not choosing us, where we are in management mode, which would be people pleasing tendencies. We're looking outside of ourselves for how to manage how somebody else perceives me, which is going to completely then have you disconnected from your femininity. Because if you think of femininity, it's truly like your authentic self-expression, right? Your authenticity, your shedding those patterns of performance and needing to be a certain way, to be liked, to get approval. But codependency is all that the management mode that we're in, people pleasing tendencies, doormatting, pretzeling ourselves to get a man to like us. And it can be even more subtle where a woman's like, how do I be the perfect feminine woman to get a man to like me? Like, what is this, what does it mean to be the perfect feminine woman? And it's really like the shedding of those layers. But to truly shed those layers, we have to look at the inner child that developed all of these coping strategies to try to get love, right? To try to be the perfect child, to get attention from mom or dad, to get love. And then when we haven't actually done that deeper inner work, we're entering relationships from these performative patterns. And so the more that you meet that guy and there's deep attraction and you really like him, that's when all that inner wounding gets activated. And we completely lose the ability to be our authentic selves. Women are relating more from like the fear of abandonment, from the fear of not being chosen. She can't speak up for her needs. She can't, she loses sense of her authentic self. And then the deeper wounding there too is like, again, we're dating from this sense of an emotional void, an emptiness, and that leads to a lack of boundaries, which is also going to make a woman a prime suspect for narcissistic men. Codependency and a lack of boundaries is like the biggest trigger that leads to a woman attracting that type of narcissism, because men just can spot where there's that emotional void within the woman, and he comes in and swoops in, and it's like there's this rescue fantasy within the codependent woman. So, that's just one way you can understand the feminine energy is through that lens of like what it's not.
And I love seeing it that way because there's a lot of talk on what it is, but when we're like looking at what it isn't, you're able to like identify when I guess you're not in that frequency yourself. Right. And that's really important to note. So then if you mentioned quite a few things there, but what are some of the common things that you're seeing people come to you for when they're showing up of like, okay, I want to get better at dating or I want to improve my love life? What are the blind spots that they're having in that question or in their come from that maybe they're not even asking you about?
I would say, okay, it's one of the biggest blind spots is a woman just getting stuck, longing for the guy who's not really showing up for her, not choosing her. So she thinks outwardly he's very masculine. He looks masculine. He's maybe got a great body. He's got a great career. He's successful. And she's like, oh, masculine man. But then he doesn't pursue. He doesn't lead. He doesn't take action with her. But because she still has an inner abandonment wound that she hasn't healed. And this is really about the disconnection from her feminine. She hasn't healed that. And so she still thinks love requires overworking for love. Love requires chasing. Love requires her to take some action to get that love. And that's a direct mirror of actually how she's relating internally to her own heart and her emotional needs. So because she hasn't actually done the inner work to change the relationship to her inner child, to her heart, and to her needs, she's still in that pattern of chasing and overworking for love, which leads her pining and longing for men who are not showing up for her, and an inability to truly like radiate from her feminine and attract men and have men stepping up and men choosing. And so one of the big things that's taught in feminine energy is like building a dating rotation, right? And there can be a lot of resistance women have. They're like, no, I just want to date one man. But the thing is feminine energy is very passive, right? When you're dating from your feminine, it's the passive energy. It's the woman. She takes action from a place of she guides. She guides the masculine through the quality of her open heart. She's through sharing her feelings and inner world, but she's not taking the active masculine energy in terms of asking him on dates, leading the conversation and asking all the questions. So she's very passive. So if a woman doesn't have options with multiple men pursuing her, and one man is not taking the action that she wants, not asking her out on the number of dates that she wants, not pursuing her at the level that she wants, she ends up feeling helpless and powerless in her dating because you're the feminine, right? You're not going to, unless you do become the masculine energy, which many women do, and then she just steps in and makes to make up for his lack of masculine energy. But if you don't have real options for yourself, then you feel helpless and powerless and you're just sitting there like, well, what do I do? So for a woman to truly date from a place of empowerment, she needs to be, first, she has to do the inner healing work because the quality of men she attracts in her dating life is simply going to be a mirror of her connection to herself, to her emotional world, to how genuinely filled that she feels, to the level of intimacy she has with herself. Because every relationship is simply, for everyone, is a mirror of the level of emotional intimacy we have with ourselves. And so when you do that work, I see this across the board with women, then she really literally becomes radiant and magnetic. So radiance is actually an energetic quality of inner light that a woman emits the more that she's done the inner work to connect to her heart, her feeling world, and to create that level of emotional intimacy. So you have to imagine it's like this inner light switch that turns on, and a woman literally starts to emanate this light in her energetic field, which leads to magnetism, and that radiance and magnetism is feminine woman's attraction. So the feminine energy tends to stay in one place, so to speak, and attract things to her. Masculine energy is assertion. It gets what it wants by taking action. It kind of like cuts through all the crap and just like goes after what it wants, right? You'll use a lot of masculine energy in your career, in your purpose, right? Women with my very driven alpha successful women have a lot of beautiful masculine energy. And like, yes, you want that in your career, but then you take that into your dating life and it's going to lead to, of course, you're only going to attract the opposite, which is the more passive men who are going to be responsive to a woman who is in the active masculine energy.
Right. Wow. And so what does that masculine energy look like in dating for a woman when she's in her masculine dating? What are some examples that you can give so that people can be aware of when they're in it?
So like, let's just say on a dating app, one common example is a woman will step in and start leading the conversation and asking most of the questions. So if a man's not really like showing interest, right? It will show interest through asking questions, through leading. When a man's interested in a woman, that masculine energy goes after what it wants, right? In his career, in his love life, because you know, I'm not going to digress, but yeah, so a man will go after what he wants. But if a man's not doing that, a woman in her masculine energy will step in and she becomes the one leading, asking the questions, trying to, show interest in him, thinking, I'm going to get this man to open up. I'm going to get him to, tell me about his inner world. Even women will do this on dates where she thinks like, okay, in order to get this man to like me, I'm going to show a lot of interest in him. I'm going to ask him a lot of questions. And he opens up emotionally and she's opening him emotionally. And that man is not going to build emotional attraction with her. The masculine builds emotional attraction when he opens up the feminine. So it's similar to the sex act, right? A man penetrates a woman, he opens her up physically, and that's how he's actually connecting with her. That's why we have the feminine sex energy is like it's receptive, right? And the masculine is penetrative. You even see that in our sexual organs. And so when a woman is is afraid of her feelings, afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to express who she is, she often is unconsciously in her masculine because it's a way to deflect that deeper vulnerability of really revealing who she is. And she almost stays guarded by, it's a very common pattern I'll see in women where she kind of becomes like the therapist to a man. She gets him to open up. And then she's like, well, why didn't he ask me on a date? He didn't show any interest because she didn't give him the opportunity to build emotional connection and open her up.
So it requires a lot of space, a lot of trust. So like the invitation for the man to show up and do that, because I can hear women now saying, well, he's not doing it. Well, is there even any space for him to? And I think that would be the real invitation of the actual feminine energy, dude. Right.
Yeah, very true. Like even from body language, like I tell women on dates, like, is your energy leaned back? Are your arms crossed? Are you coming off really guarded? Or is your energy leaned back, arms open? You're in your body, right? So this is why all my work starts with somatic work. Like, can you actually just breathe, be in your body? Because that's going to help you let go of the performative patterns. It's going to help you really relax into your beingness. And then just allow from there, a man's going to pick up on that. And he starts to feel more in his body too. Like the feminine almost initiates that. She kind of like, she brings a man into her body through her embodied presence. Actually, a masculine man can do that for a woman too. They're both going to pick up, there's a dynamic happening. But yeah, she starts to surrender into her body and her beingness and this like relaxation. And then the man will just naturally be responsive and like he's going to start asking her questions, opening her up. And this is where it's a woman's work to feel like, do I feel confident and safe enough in myself to start to reveal the deeper authenticity of who I am and not to be in the performative patterns of like, well, who does he want me to be to get him to like me? What do I need to say? How do I need to impress him? And that's where like kind of the deeper inner work hasn't been done. Because we pick up on that we're always picking up energetically on how someone is showing up.
Right. And you have a really big like attunement even subconsciously to all of that. So what are some ways that are more feminine that women can really start showing up in dating that evoke this penetration from a man emotionally that they're looking for?
And number one would be her communication from the very first text message. She needs to know how to communicate from a feminine feeling centered place. So a lot of women, they're used to communicating from dry, logical, masculine communication. So a man will say, hey, lovely to connect with you. And she's like, hey, nice to connect. How's your day? And it's just very dry and flat versus a woman who's from communicating from her feminine, communicating from true feminine vulnerability. A lot of times women will think vulnerability means like over revealing and sharing like her deep trauma and, past and like being too heavy. But feminine vulnerability in the beginning of dating is just sharing like how a man makes you feel. Like when a great guy just sends you a like on a dating app, something a feminine woman might say is like, oh my gosh, seeing your like just put a big smile on my face. Like that is so vulnerable to tell a man like how just seeing his like just made you feel. And now a man's like, whoa, okay, this woman is giving me the green light. She's receptive to my masculine energy. And that for him then creates that invitation to be in that pursuing energy and, start to ask more questions. But it starts with, can you drop into your body and communicate from a feeling centered place? From feminine communication is also descriptive. It's like inviting a man into your inner world. So like, I'm sitting at the beach today and I feel the warm sunshine on my skin and it just feels so amazing. And like now this man is like, now you're no longer this like static image to a man. A man's like, oh, imagining you at the beach with the warm sunshine on your skin. And like now he's dropped into his body, his heart, and he starts to feel this connection because the feminine lead is the emotional leader of the relationship. Right. The masculine is the action taker, but the feminine leads through the emotional realm. And so that's, and you can learn surface level tips and tricks around dating and all this. But if a woman hasn't done the inner emotional work, then when you get into the deeper nuances of a real relationship, and like, you've really got to master communication and like, how do I manage the bigger things around communication? This is where I see a lot of women fall apart. And like, when she needs to communicate her needs, when she needs to communicate her wounds, this is where she doesn't know how to do it in a way that inspires a man to actually want to step up and meet her needs. And she communicates from wounding, from shutdown, because she hasn't really developed a deeper connection to the nuances of her feelings. Because really, feminine energy is a woman's connection to her feelings, to her emotions, and to her inner world, and how developed that connection is. And our feelings are layered, right? So we have the surface layer of feelings. We have that blunt surface layer of like, the wound. And then underneath that, right, the wound might be like, I feel you don't care about me. But underneath that, there's deeper layers of feelings. There's the feeling of like, I feel really sad. That's the vulnerability underneath that wound. And so when a woman can start to feel into the nuances of all her feelings and then be able to articulate it in a way that inspires a man to feel like he can still win with her. Because most women, when it comes to communication and she feels wounded in the relationship, she's communicating from a place of shutdown and telling a man how he failed her, how he didn't get it right. And the masculine instinct wants to feel like a woman's hero. He wants to feel like he can win with her. But as soon as a woman is always communicating like, well, you never do it right. And you like, why didn't you text me? A woman was telling me this the other day. She told her boyfriend, well, I wish like you could have at least asked me to come over. Why didn't you even do that? And it's like telling him how he got it wrong versus telling him what would have felt good and giving him an opportunity to win with her. And that's really important for men because then he feels he has a way to win and he wants to feel like a man. He wants to feel like I can meet her needs, but not always being told he's getting it wrong and he's a failure.
That part is huge right there. Showing up and inviting and requesting versus, well, why didn't you do it this way? Or taking it as an attack or kind of getting triggered and defensive. That's so, and I'll just speak for as being a man, it's such a difference feeling in the body. And it really goes a long way. And I love what you said too about like, you can learn all the tips and tricks, but if you haven't done the inner work and actually embodied this stuff, when the going gets going, your subconscious is going to override all of it. So what are some of the inner work stuff that needs to happen for that transition to actually occur to real femininity?
I mean, and I will just speak too from my own experience. I have done so much inner work to heal my feminine. I used to show up with such deep wounding because I didn't have parents who knew how to self-regulate. My mother did not model, feminine vulnerability because she didn't have parents that did that for herself. So by no means am I blaming my parents, but it just, wasn't modeled. And so, our mother was our feminine energy blueprint. She was the one that modeled for us our connection to our emotions, our feelings, and how also our parents related to our emotions and feelings. Was there space for our needs? So the number one thing I would say that was first and foremost foundational is nervous system regulation work. If we don't know how to bring ourselves back to regulation, to safety, we're just, we're in our heads, right? And when we're in our heads, we're more connected to the story about what happened rather than what we're feeling, right? The story is everything we're telling ourselves around what happened versus the feeling that's underneath that. So when you find yourself ruminating and you're like, but he did this and you can't get out of that ruminating circle, that means you're stuck in your head and you're not actually feeling what's underneath that. And this is where the deeper somatic work is foundational for that, because I've had a lot of women come to me and she's like kind of completely numb from feelings, how to even identify feelings in her body. And so somatic work starts with getting us into our body and our sensations, the sensations in your body, because sensations, like it's that, the fluttering in my heart would be a sensation, the knots in my belly. And those sensations are precursors to feelings. So the sensation, the fluttering in my chest is a precursor to maybe a feeling of anxiety. And so as we start to develop the deeper connection to our body, not only can we regulate back to safety, because if you're in a dysregulated state, you're not going to have any access to vulnerability. It's all going to be reactivity and, that blunt surface layer of wounding that we're experiencing. But when we can regulate, when we could find safety in our bodies, then we can start to explore the surface. We can start to explore the layers of our feelings, right? Because that initial layer might be like, I feel like, I feel disrespected right now. Like that's one, a lot of women will think that she's being vulnerable by telling a man, I feel disrespected. That is not vulnerability. That's actually, you're criticizing a man, you're judging him. You tell a man you feel disrespected, he's going to feel attacked. But the deeper feeling, there's a deeper nuance underneath that. It's like, I actually feel really sad right now. I feel even hurt might not even be true vulnerability, because there's still a sense of like judging, like you did something to me. But true vulnerability is um, it's the deepest layer of feeling you can access, and it's taking full responsibility for those feelings as yours. And so oftentimes um, we're not actually taking responsibility for our feelings as ours, especially when we're more in our shadow feminine. We're making it about you did something to make me feel this way, and that totally blocks our vulnerability.
Right.
From our vulnerability, as I always say, the first thing around vulnerability is taking ownership for your feelings as yours. And then when you can express that deepest layer of your feeling, and just like, I feel really sad right now, then you're creating this invitation for a man to actually want to meet the needs of your heart, versus when you're in subtle attack or judging him, he now has to defend himself from you and from your emotional, energetic attack against him.
Right. And there's a lot of constructs and inner workings to move through on this, I think, to really get to an embodied place. That's also your perspective of men. If you're always on the defense, thinking that or on the attack, even thinking whatever subconsciously about men, it's not going to serve your dynamics. So I'm curious too, like, what framing do women need to have in this space to actually start to build a different dynamic with men around them, no matter what's happened in their past? Because while some things that have happened may be valid, it's like, okay, but if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, it's probably the glasses you got on and the way you're seeing things. Right. And so what shifts have you gone through,
Yes.
or
Oh
have
my
you
God.
support clients with?
That is an incredible question. Yeah. It really points to often deeper father wounds that hasn't been healed, or deeper wounds, or past wounds with the masculine that she hasn't healed, because you are spot on in that if a woman hasn't healed that, she's going to, there's a process in the brain called neuroception. And so when we have unprocessed past trauma that lives in the body, then through a process called neuroception, we're projecting that past trauma into the present moment, because neuroception is a way that our brain is trying to protect us from trauma repeating itself. So it says, "Oh, I remember a guy with dark hair and a beard being very aggressive and not safe to me when I was maybe a little girl, or maybe my last ex." And so if that emotional trauma has not been processed, then through that process of neuroception, I need a man like you. And even if you're really safe or not, I start to project onto you that you're going to hurt me, you're not safe. And so this is where, when we're dating from unhealed trauma, we are either attracting men who are just very similar to the trauma that we have, or we're projecting those wounds onto someone who actually is safe. But we can't see it because we're seeing things through the lens of this distortion of the trauma that's held somatically in our body and then gets projected from the subconscious into the present. And I absolutely experienced that because I had deep father wounding that I had to heal in order to really heal my relationship with the masculine, because my dad was just very aggressive, did not have the ability to self-regulate. And so, there was a lot of unconscious anger towards the masculine that I had to process through embodiment work, through somatic work. And so if a woman hasn't done that, and I see this with a lot of women with deep father wounds or just wounds around the masculine, there's this unconscious anger that she hasn't expressed. And that anger needs a sacred container. It needs to be expressed because there's so much deep grief underneath that she needs to access in order to truly heal her feminine and come back into her heart and let down that. You'll hear a lot of talk around like the masculine shield. That masculine shield that a woman puts up around her heart is because of that wounding that she experienced. And that's everything that's blocking that innate feminine warmth and softness and openness that an emotionally available man must experience from a woman in order to move the connection forward.
Yeah, most definitely. And a lot of interplay with this is as you were talking about, like the inner workings of your feelings, your emotions, the sensations in your body, and understanding that as it relates to being a woman and your own femininity. And part of that, I mean, there's very literal a warfare going on for women that women have to go through with so many different things on women's health as it relates to this, and it can be distorted. And I know before we started recording, you mentioned you recently had an explant, and that is also something that I think we need to talk about, because that can affect your inner workings, which affects your femininity, which affects your dating. So like, would you mind just talking about that a little bit more? Because, I
Yeah.
think a lot of women can like listen to podcasts and do the work, but their system is so not safe because of chemicals or weird things in your body that don't belong there. And it distorts what you see. So anyway, I take it away.
Yes, I am so excited to announce I had these silicone implants removed from my body, because I used to believe that if I just had these in my body, it was going to be the thing that got the attention from men, that got me love, right? Like, it's not until we look at it like through this lens that we see the distortion that we're operating from. You're like, wait, I'm going to put these in my body, and this is going to, and a woman will convince themselves, no, I'm doing it just for me. I'm doing it just to look good in my clothes. But that's still all distortion, because we're, true feminine energy is the full acceptance of yourself, of just who you are, and not needing to change and to conform to society's standards of what femininity should look like or should be. But the other thing I just want to point out around implants, both silicone and saline, is that they are toxic to the body. They pose a high risk of toxicity to the body. You will see, the implants I showed you, no rupture in the implants. Silicone implants, no rupture. But my body was in a place of chronic inflammation from 2020 until I just had them removed August 28th. And I was in denial for, all those years, not wanting to believe that my implants could be the cause of my inflammation, because I didn't want to face the fact that I needed to get them removed. I didn't want to face like who I would be without these implants. And then it was actually through a plant medicine ceremony with psilocybin that the plants, like, I was sitting there, I was in ceremony, and it was just like this message from my higher self that was like, get these out of your body. These are toxic. And it was just so clear that was the voice of my higher self speaking to me. And in that moment, I was like, oh shit, you need to get a doctor. You need to get these out of your body. The biggest fear at that moment became, how soon can I get these out? Can I get an appointment? Because my health and my body is literally at risk. And women just do not realize like what the risk she's setting herself up for with implants. Because we think like, oh, sure, just every 12 years, 10 years, I'm just going to get new implants. I'm just going to go undergo this insane surgery that puts your body through tons of antibiotics, tons of, I was on, I think it's fentanyl.
Wow.
Like you're on these deep pain medications that are messing up your liver post-surgery to manage the pain. It's like, it's so toxic for your body. And women think like, oh, sure, just every 10 years, I'm just going to get new implants. And every time you have a new surgery, you are putting your body at more risk for exposure from viruses. Because really what's underneath most of the breast implant illness symptoms is virus and a heavy viral load. Because the
Mm.
implants, there's a subtle, so basically when you have the implants in your body, there's a capsule that forms around the implant. And that's basically the body's natural reaction to a foreign object. And so this capsule forms around the implant. But this also comes some knowledge from the Anthony Williams. And the liver actually creates enzymes that go around the implant as a way the body is like, realize it's a foreign object that's toxic. And so these liver enzymes go around the implant. And so it's creating this heat around the implant. And that heat is actually, so it's not that there's a leak, but it's actually like there is almost like a gaseous leak. Like there is like
Mm.
some of the on a very molecular level, there's gas from the silicone implant that's going into the body. And so that's feeding the toxic the viral load in the body. The toxicity feeds the viruses, because viruses feed on heavy metals and on any kind of like toxicity in the body, which would be especially silicone implants. Now, saline implants pose the risk of mold toxicity, which a lot of people
Wow.
don't talk about or don't realize, which can wreak havoc on the body equally. And so, but the more the more surgeries a woman has. So I had my first implants I got in I don't know, when I was like late 20s or something. But I still had severe OCD from childhood that I had not addressed. Um, and which, that's a whole other topic on why I had severe OCD. But so then I had implants. The doctor put one a little bit bigger than the other to correct for natural asymmetry in the body. And it always drove me nuts. I was like, I can feel that they're different. And, like with OCD, you want everything like you're hyper obsessive around like control and perfection. And so I could always feel it. And so I had the implants removed. We got a new set in. And so every surgery is just putting you at higher risk for viral infections. And so this is like the EBV virus, which actually stems from it's the same virus under mononucleosis. Yeah, mono. And
Right.
so that virus can actually hibernate in the body for years and years. It just can live dormant in the organs. And then when we undergo surgery, when we have any kind of like deep depression, or that virus will spring up and it goes into action because the immune system is knocked down and weak. And so what a lot of symptoms that women experience around breast implant illness, like losing her hair, inflammation, she'll get this kind of eczema on her body, rashes on her body. That's often the virus actually coming up. But that virus, again, is feeding on the toxicity in the body. So there's a lot of misunderstanding that you can't start detoxing while you have implants in. That is so far from the truth. You need to detox ASAP. Like pre-explant, you need to start detoxing. I highly recommend going raw vegan and getting on some good detox supplements. I'm using Cellcore's product. I also have used Zen Cleanse, and Zeolite is really great to start to rid heavy metals from the body. The Medical Mediums Detox Smoothie with spirulina. When I was before I extracted my implants, I did one like deep cleanse. I've pretty much been raw vegan since, because that's all my body can handle at the moment, with little minor cheat days or a cheat meal here or there. But when I first did my deep detox, like was literally like full on flu symptoms, in
Wow.
bed, night sweats, for 3 days. And it was just my body detoxing. And I'm talking even detoxing, like, when you had the teeth fillings, like the silver teeth fillings, right? That
Mhm.
actually created mercury toxicity in the body. So like all of these toxins in the body, even just what we're getting from the environment, is there that goes and hides in our organs, in different parts of our brain, which leads to brain fog, another symptom that a lot of women will complain of from BII. Um, and and so yeah, detoxing right away is super important. I would say detoxing pre-explant is really important, and then you're still likely going to have to detox post-explant. And
Mhm.
there are some surgeons, I'm the first surgeon who put my implants in. He was totally in denial that it was anything about the implants. I told him my symptoms, and he's like, well, look, you know, I've seen numerous patients come here and complain of these symptoms, and we take the implants out. She still has symptoms. And therefore, if we take the implants out and the symptoms are still there, this cannot be the root cause of the problem. It's like, it's
Right.
just the denial that doctors who profit off of putting implants in the body, of course, it is just, disgusting. But there is a need, there's a demand for it. So, women are going to keep doing it, but yeah, it's just, it's the situation that is present in today's society.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that, because I think it's really important that people like wake up and realize like how that can affect things. And I don't think just because it's normal doesn't mean it's natural, and doesn't mean it's necessarily the healthiest thing. I'm curious how that impacted your lived experience of life, and maybe not even just your relationship with men, but just life in general in that season when you were experiencing all this
I
stuff.
mean, in a lot of ways, I'm so grateful for my breast implant illness experience, because I would have never had just the incentive to give up alcohol, to give up coffee, to go raw vegan, like, and how I've seen it affect my appearance. And like, yeah, I'm a vain person. Like, I have vanity is one of my, my, yeah, I have some vanity. Let's just put it that way. And so, I got implants for, what, of course. So, but like going raw vegan, I was like, whoa, this truly is the fountain of youth. this truly, like, just because you're taking in so many enzymes, and those raw living enzymes are what feed your cells. And like, I've seen my face reverse aging. I've seen just more natural youthfulness, flow, and vibrancy start to come about in my body. And I've stopped Botox. I stopped dyeing my hair. I've seen my hair color just start to come back naturally. And I was like, whoa, like, for a woman who used to always have so much anxiety around aging and be like really obsessive around that, I just feel like that is totally kind of like shed from me, because I know that there is a natural path to aging gracefully and not having to go these other like really distorted routes and then look super superficial and artificial. And yeah, so in that sense, I'm really grateful for my detox. I mean, just having given up alcohol, like, that's one of the biggest agers for women. And I know giving up alcohol is such a tough one. Giving up coffee was a tough one. I mean, I
Been
know
there, yeah.
everything's controversial around diet and health, but there's some people that are like, coffee is great, but the thing, it can have benefits, but a lot of people are addicted to it. It just naturally will stimulate, it stimulates, what is it?
Cortisol, stress response in your body.
Oh, now I'm forgetting yeah, cortisol. Yeah, immediate stimulates cortisol. And so, your fight or flight response is activated. It burns out your adrenals, and it's extremely dehydrating to the body. And so it's going to lead to faster aging and like little bits here or there. But most people are just consuming copious amounts of coffee. And um, yeah, and it's not actually that beneficial.
Right, right. This is very true. I mean, I experienced that with coffee. I had a really bad addiction in 2019 that got very severe, and it's been an on and off battle with it for quite a
Oh,
while.
really?
Yeah, I mean, I was having the equivalent of 10 cups of coffee worth of caffeine a day, and somehow still alive. Like, it was insane. I'd drink more coffee and get tired because my adrenals were just so shot. There are many layers to that, but
Yeah,
it really affected so much of my life. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. Which is a sign of then adrenal burnout. Once you're drinking copious amounts of coffee and you realize, like, I'm actually getting tired, your adrenals and hormone levels are completely dysregulated. So one thing I found that's been super healing, though, is celery juice. I know that's also been such a trendy thing, but if you read the book around celery juice, so I think it's by Anthony Williams, the medical medium, and like, when you really understand what celery juice is doing and the sodium cluster salts and how it's just it even helps heal addictions. Like, that was one of the biggest things that healed my addiction to coffee.
Wow.
Was starting to drink celery juice, because the sodium cluster salts also act in a way that is he calls it the most oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word, the hydrating drink, for our body, the drink with the most electrolytes, because of the nature of the sodium cluster salts and the way they work in the body. And the sodium cluster salts also act in a certain way that help remove the virus from the body. So any woman struggling with breast implant illness, I would say, like, try your best, go raw vegan as much as you can, as much of your meals that can be raw vegan, and drink celery juice on an empty stomach in the morning and the evening. And you're going to notice your symptoms just dramatically decrease.
So, and with these symptoms decreasing and then everything that you've gone through and experienced, again, how has that shifted your dynamic with men, or even in your life, or what have you seen with clients, and how your own health can affect the lens in which you're viewing dating and relationships?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, I would say any woman going through a health crisis, you are not in a place to be dating. Let me just say that, speaking from personal experience. The universe will just continue to mirror back to you men who are probably not a good fit, who probably are not emotionally available, because you're not, even if you're like, I tried dating even through my health crisis, when I had done all the inner emotional work, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to, make this happen and date because I'm a relationship coach, and it would just be like, I would attract men who, just weren't the right fit, because the universe was like, you need to pause, you need to heal, you need to focus on your body. So if you're dealing with a chronic health issue, you are not in a place to be dating. You need to stop following relationship coaches and dating coaches and go get yourself a health coach and heal your body and put yourself and your body first, because, you know, you're just not going to be a match you're not going to be able to call in your divine partner until you really show the universe, I am taking radical responsibility for my health. And that is the biggest mirror of your self-love.
Mm, most
So
definitely.
personally for me, I am single right now. I love helping my clients get engaged, find their man. I've realized that like for me, my journey right now is just, probably another 2, 3 months. Just I've been deep on the detox for the last 2 years, and I see myself coming on the other side of it very quickly. And my work is just right now focusing on my clients and my business, and taking these next couple months just to like go deep into my detoxing and healing, because it's really hard to date when you're like, oh, I'm not eating right now. I try, I'm on a juice cleanse, or I'm just even, I
Yeah.
still think about staying raw vegan, and dating as a raw vegan is really tough. In fact, yeah, I'm gonna be on Jillian Berry's podcast soon, and she's all around raw vegan. She's incredible. I love her work. And she's such an inspiration to be raw vegan, but it's brought up a lot. Like I've tried, even just putting it out there as a raw vegan, and it really required me to break through some like people pleasing and codependency, to be like, oh, I'll pretend that like maybe I'm not raw vegan to like please you. And when I just really radically owned it and was like, look, this is who I am and take it or leave it, then I actually did start to attract men who were completely accepting of it and willing to meet my dietary preferences. But yeah, that's something I'm still trying to sort out for myself, how where I'll be on the raw vegan path. I do see myself staying majority raw vegan, like probably my Monday through Friday will be like 100% raw vegan, with maybe like a regular meal here and there on a Friday or Saturday um, once I'm further along on my healing journey. But yeah, just because I've seen the benefits of raw vegan, like look up Blue Corona. He's like the one that kind of the father of the raw vegan movement. He's 75 years old now, and he looks like
Oh,
he's probably late 40s, 50s. Like just his skin is so vibrant, no wrinkles. And it's because it's just like all the enzymes he's taking into his body, those living enzymes are food for yourself, right? When you're eating living food, we become, more alive and vibrant.
mm-hmm. Most definitely. Well, and so I love that you're putting your focus on your work right now and serving clients. So what all offerings do you have right now? What's coming up? I'd love to hear more about your work and where people can find you.
Yes. So the program is the Embodied Feminine Woman, and this is for single women who are struggling in their love life, either recent heartbreak, or you've been in a pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable men, narcissistic men, men more on their feminine side. You have patterns of overworking for love. And so the first 2 months, we start off on the deeper healing work, everything you need to do to just reconnect to your feminine, to heal those deeper patterns of why you attract certain types of men into your life. And then the third month is where we focus on getting you out there dating, really understanding what it looks like to date from your feminine energy. And so there's two options. Women can enroll in the 3-month program or 6 months. And this, kind of tailors to each woman's level of where she wants to invest in herself. But yeah, I've had such incredible results from clients, often very quickly. Many women, I would say one of the most mind-blowing things is women will come to me having spent 10, 15 years in therapy, stuck in the same patterns with men, stuck 15, 10 years of therapy, still attracting emotionally unavailable men, still attracting narcissistic men. And when they've gone through the Embodied Feminine Woman, she has healed the root of those patterns and attracted aligned love, often for the first time in her life. And this is because we are approaching healing and feminine energy first and foremost from the lens of the nervous system and a somatic based approach, and healing the inner child from what I call somatic parts work, because these parts live in our body and show up as dysregulation. And so, like, women will often struggle with speaking up for her needs, but that inability to speak up for her needs is first and foremost going to show up in the body somewhere, sometimes in the throat space, and it's going to show up as this dysregulation. But that's coming from a much younger part of herself who felt speaking up for my needs is not safe. And so this is showing up somatically in the body. And so if that's not regulated through the nervous system and renegotiated in the body, then that old response just keeps coming up again and again. Plus, I take my clients through advanced work around healing the mother and father wound, deep embodiment practices around that. my background is actually in depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. And so, I approach things actually first and foremost from the lens of a depth psychology approach. But with depth psychology, um, it's often said that we will repeatedly attract a partner who is the mirror or the imago, is how it's often said, which is Latin for image, of the parent we experience the most wounding with. And so many times, if a woman had a narcissistic mother or father, she's repeatedly attracting a partner who is the image of the parent she experienced the most wounding with again and again. And that's showing her because unconsciously that aspect of her has not been healed, not been resolved. And so every relationship is really just mirroring back to us the deeper parts of ourselves that are asking to be healed. So the first 2 months we focus on deeper inner work, and then the last month is really the work around feminine energy, how to date from your feminine, understanding everything around feminine communication, vulnerability, and just had clients have incredible results. Worked with women around the world, even working with a woman currently right now who's in Oman Oman. I think I'm not pronouncing it as correctly, but I'm in the Middle East. And I was just like, it just warms my heart so much that like even helping women in, the Middle East where you have these like much stronger stereotypes of like masculine being, very toxic and controlling. And she is attracting the most healthy, kind, loving masculine men in the Middle East. Like these men are out there. It's just we attract simply the mirror of who we are embodying, of the
That's
energy that we're
absolutely
in.
amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And if anybody wants to find out more about it, I'll leave your Instagram down below so they can check out your page. But thank you so much for sharing your heart and your wisdom here on the show with us today. This was amazing. We went all the places.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chat with you.
Very welcome.